Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and you are welcome to this live webinar session titled Leveraging Business Analytics in the Oil and Gas Industry, brought to you by SPE Lagos section as part of our mission to collect, disseminate, and exchange technical knowledge concerning the exploration, development, and production of oil and gas resources and related technologies for the public benefit. So before I introduce our guest speaker, I would like to remind us that we are still in the middle of a global pandemic, even though life in Lagos and Nigeria, and actually most other countries in the world, are beginning to open up. So very quickly, I would go through some quick COVID-19 safety tips. Please wash your hands frequently or use an alcohol-based sanitizer. Whenever you're out in public, please use your face masks. Avoid large gatherings. And if you feel any COVID-19 symptoms, you're advised to self-isolate and contact NCDC on that number, which is toll-free. So I will be introducing our guest speaker right now. His name is Adonye Adafe-Jaja. He is an assistant manager at a Big Four professional services firm. He is an experienced audit and risk and controls professional with over 6 years experience delivering value to organizations spanning several industries. He has a BSc in information systems from the American University of Nigeria and is a certified information systems auditor. You are welcome, Adonye. I would also like to announce that you can put in your comments and your questions in the Q&A section, and all of them would be addressed at the end of this presentation. So the next voice you'll be hearing now will be that of Adonye, our guest speaker for this live webinar event. You're welcome, Adonye.
Hi everyone. So welcome to this session on leveraging business analytics in the oil and gas industry. My name is Adonye, Adafe-Jaja. We'll be going through this together. So we begin with the table of contents. What are we looking at today? We have first things first, the executive summary and introduction into this. What is big data? What are the characteristics of big data? What are the technologies for managing big data and processing it? What are the applications of business analytics in the upstream sector, midstream sector, and the downstream sector? What are the challenges of adoption of business analytics? What are the benefits? And what are the considerations in applying big data tools? The next steps, and last but not least, the question and answers from everybody. So a quick summary of what we are going to look into. We know that the oil and gas industry is having to reinvent itself as a result of economic downturns around the world, and this means that companies have to look for efficient ways to achieve success. Now, because of this, the industry is adopting big data analytics into whatever they are doing, and most large amounts of data, people processing it is becoming a lot more mainstream. So we are going to delve into how companies need to take advantage of these big data analytics to integrate this data, interpret it to drive faster and more accurate decisions in the workplace. So an introduction into this. Now, recent technological improvements have resulted in the daily generation of massive data sets in oil and gas exploration and production, and basically everything that concerns data in the oil and gas space. Now, it's been reported, this was a paper presented at an SPE conference in Texas, that managing this data set is a major concern among oil and gas companies, and that a lot of people, a lot of petroleum scientists and geoscientists spend a lot of time, petroleum engineers and geoscientists spend a lot of time to manage this data. So, and it brings us to what is big data, right? Now, big data refers to the technologies that are involved in handling and processing these massive data sets. That is what big data is in a nutshell. Now, what is big data? Big data, it's unstructured data, data that is not organized, text heavy, and then multi-structured data that comes from different formats and resulting from people and machine interactions. So when people and machine interact, they bring in data from different, that are structured in different ways. This data is not organized, you can't really look at one particular point and say that this is one form in which it takes. So that's what big data is. It also defines, the big data analytics also defines the first characteristic of this method, and that is the size of the available data set. So, which means that in this particular presentation, we're looking at it being unstructured data. Now, what are the characteristics of big data? Sorry, give me a second. So there are distinct characteristics related to the data, which make it viable for big data tools. Now, these characteristics are well named by IBM as the 3 V's. Now, what are these 3 V's, you may ask? These V's are 1, volume. That's the first V. The second V is variety. And the third V is velocity. Now, they've been standard V's that have occurred over time that people have been using over time. But then recently we've looked at an additional 2 V's, which some recent articles have had, and then so this definition has been broadened to add 2 other V's. So the fourth one is veracity, and the last one is value. So 5 characteristics that we are going to look at of big data today. So let's begin. The first one is volume. Now, what is volume? So volume is, and I'm looking at this into, now it can be looked at in different ways, but this is specific to the oil and gas industry, right? So volume is the quantity of data or information that is recorded, right? That's what volume is. So this data can come from any sensor or data recording tool. Any sensor or data recording tool that we have. Now, the vast quantity of data is challenging to be handled because there are a lot of issues, but chiefly among this is storage, sustainability, and analysis, right? That's why this quantity is challenging to be handled. Now, many companies are dealing with a huge volume of data in their archives, and mainly because they don't have the capacity of processing this data. So this data just stays in the archives, and nobody is doing anything about it, right? Now, the next one is variety. What's variety? Variety refers to the various types of data that is generated, stored, and analyzed. Now, so we have, like we've said, that there's a lot of data that is there, but then there are different varieties of the data. Now, the different data recording devices and sensors give us different results, different sizes of data, different formats of data. So what this means is that the data is varied in nature, right? It can be in text, image, audio, and video, right? The classification can be done in a more technical way as structured, semi-structured, and unstructured data, if you want to go that route. Next one is velocity. Next characteristic is velocity. Now, what is velocity, you may ask? Good question. Now, velocity is the speed at which data is transmitted and processed, right? It also refers to the fast pace of data generation. You understand why I said fast pace of data generation in a bit. Now, the challenging issue about velocity is the limited number of available processing units compared to the volume of the data that we have, right? So now, why I said that we know in a bit was that the data generation velocity is huge, as a data of 5 exabytes is generated in just 2 days. That's how much data is being generated. That is a lot. It's a lot of data. Now, to bring out the point that is a lot of data, 5 exabytes was the equivalent of the number of data that was created by humans until 2003. So from the beginning of time until 2003, this was a 5 exabyte of data was generated, and there, but right now it's being generated every 2 days. That is a lot, right? So veracity. What is veracity? Now, it's the quality and usefulness of the available data for the purpose of analysis and decision making. So yes, you might have a lot of data, and initially we had said that data can be structured and unstructured, right? So how do we distinguish between clean and unrefined data? How do you distinguish between these two? And that's why we want to be sure of the veracity of this data. Now, this is very important because unrefined data, also known as dirty data, can affect the velocity and the accuracy of analysis of data. So we have to make sure that this data is professionally and efficiently processed, and filter to be used for data analysis. Otherwise, we cannot rely on this particular data if it's unrefined or if it's dirty data. So we have to make sure, ascertain the veracity of this data, right? Now, it's challenging, especially in the oil and gas industry, because of the nature of the data, which mainly comes from subsurface facilities. Now, another challenge of the data collected is because it's done through conventional manual data recording, which is done by human operators, by human beings. Anything that is done by human beings is subject to issues. It's not, it can't be totally error-free, right? We try as much as possible to make it, but then we cannot guarantee 100% error-free data. Now, what's the next one? Value. What's value to you? What's value to me? What's value to everybody? So value, it's a very significant characteristic of big data, because if we do all of this and we don't have any value for it, then there is no need for that investment, right? So the return value of investment for big data infrastructure is of a great importance. Now, it analyzes huge data sets to reveal underlying trends and help engineers to forecast the potential issue, right? Now, knowing the future performance of equipment used during operation and identifying the failures before happening can make the company to have competitive advantage and bring value to the company. So we need to make sure that this is what happens, right? We need to make sure that this value to the company is brought. And how do we bring that value? That we know the future performance of the equipment that is being used, identify the failures, and then make sure that that company has a competitive advantage. Now, we are done with the 5 characteristics of this. Technologies for big data management and processing big data. What are these technologies, right? What are these technologies for big data management? Now, there are 2 ways to put that. So first thing is technology for big data management, and then technologies for processing big data. Now, so we move into that. Technology for big data management. Now, these are, how is the data stored? How do we manage it? How is it, do we bring it all together into one place where we can access it easily? So in this part of it, we are going to be looking at mainly databases we can store this data. So these are SQL relational databases. So the first one we are looking at is going to be the Apache Hadoop database. Then after that, the MongoDB, I've heard about, so the database, then Cassandra. And so those 3 databases are more or less the ones that have been reviewed, peer reviewed over time, that we can say, okay, we use these technologies and databases to store big data. Now, what do we use to process big data? So these are languages that we use for processing. So what to come into this? First one, Python. Python is a language that we can use to run our analysis on this data that we have. Then we have a language that's R, which we use for statistical purposes, also to run this. Then we have Datameter, and then we also have Big Sheets. These are all technologies that we can use to process big data in several ways. These have to be learned, and then there are also professionals that have this knowledge also. Now, let's go into how we can apply this business analytics that we've been talking for the past about 30 minutes or so. How can we apply this business analytics? So I've broken this down into the several sectors of oil and gas, right? So how do I apply it in the upstream sector? So first things first, we can apply it in managing seismic data, right? How do I mean by this? Now, upstream analytics begins with acquisition of seismic data, which collect with sensors across a potential area of interest in search of petroleum sources. Now, everybody has seen my profile, seen my degree. I did not study petroleum engineering. So, however, I'm talking to professionals who do this on a daily basis, or do this more often than not. So you understand this a lot. However, I've worked in oil industries, and then I'm able to relate to this information. So this is how upstream analytics begins. You acquire this seismic data, and then when you are looking for petroleum sources. So next thing that we do is that once it's gathered, you process it, you analyze it so that you can determine a location for drilling. So if you then do that, you can then combine this with other data sets. So a company's historical data on former drilling operations, research data to determine the oil and gas in oil reservoirs. So you have to make sure that the oil that's in the reservoir that you're going to has enough value for it to warrant for drilling in that particular place, so that you don't just waste your time or spend money and don't get any value in return, right? Now, next thing, how do we apply business analytics in upstream sector? We can apply it in optimizing a drilling process. So the drilling process, so we've talked about the seismic data, then so you get the seismic data, right, in an area of interest. What then do? You then analyze the drilling place, get all of this. So basically this is more or less what I talked about before in optimizing the drilling process. We make sure that this historical data combined with the research data that you've gotten and all your processes now determines the amount of oil and gas there. And that's how you can optimize this process, this drilling process. Now, you use it to improve reservoir engineering also. How do you do that? So the variety of the sensors that you put down into the earth, so temperature sensors, acoustic sensors, pressure sensors, can gather data that you need, that company needs to improve reservoir production. Now, a lot of this data is already available, but how is it being managed? And this is how business analytics can help in this. How is it being managed right now, and how can we improve on it to make better decisions, right? So once you've got that, so for example, companies can develop reservoir management applications to get timely and actionable information about changes in reservoir pressure, temperature, flow, and acoustics to increase insights and control over operations. When you do that, you are now able to drive reservoir performance and profitability. So this information is there already, but how then do you now put it in a dashboard that is easily accessible for everybody to look at and get the information that we need at a swipe of a finger, just immediately as soon as you need it? So that's for upstream. How do we then, we're now going to the midstream sector. How do we apply business analytics in the midstream sector? Now, for this, we look at logistics as being incredibly complex, right? Because you're trying to transport oil and gas with the lowest risks possible. Now, so you can utilize sensor analytics to ensure the safe logistics of your energy product. Predictive maintenance software analyzes sensor data from pipelines and tankers to detect abnormalities. So these have been set up before, detect abnormalities. So abnormality like fatigue, cracks, stress corrosion, seismic ground movements. And when you do all of this, it allows you to prevent accidents. So this is how we can use it in the midstream sector. Now for the downstream sector, right? How do we apply this in downstream sector? We have the knowledge that lubricants have become a huge aspect of downstream production. Right, so to get high quality outputs, we can utilize big data to test performance of plant equipment during production, market research, and user acceptance, UAT tests of different lubricant specifications, another way to leverage big data in this regard. So we need to make sure of this. Then also, risk evaluation of petroleum product storage are conducted with the use of big data modeling. So when you do this, you're able to predict durability and capability of storage facilities. And these are all important indicators of success for downstream, as proper storage will ensure that supply and distribution processes run very, very smoothly. Now, the next one was SIS, so safety instrumented systems. Now, these are center of modern technological advancements made these days. So we use it to ensure operational safety. You can use business analytics to monitor patterns, identify factors that relate to success and failure rates of SIA equipment, right, as a tool for prediction of system effectiveness. What this means is that it will extend into improve environmental protection and mitigation planning of hazards, which you know that in the oil and gas sector, safety is always number one. In every sector, but especially in the oil and gas sector, we need to make sure that safety is at a all-time high. Now, you can also use big data to utilizing economic trends and current oil price indices to create forecasts and forecast future possibilities of market behavior, right? So yeah, looking at what is going on in the market right now. So you can use it to this help the downstream industry to create a strategy that prepares it to optimize market potential, right? Sorry. So now we've said all these beautiful things that we can use business analytics to do in the upstream, midstream, and downstream sector. It's not all rosy, right? So there are a few things that can make us not achieve this aim. What are these things? What are the challenges of the adoption of business analytics? First things first, lack of awareness and business support. A lot of people do not know that these things are out there, right? They don't know that these things exist. They don't know how to go about it. And then business support from the top. So we are looking at management of the companies. How do they support what is going on here? How do they make sure that things are going on the way they're supposed to go on, right? So next thing is lack of skilled personnel. I'd mentioned it that a lot of the technologies that I talked about, not everybody can use them, and not everybody maybe can learn them right now. So do we have the skilled personnel to make sure that these technologies that we've talked about are being used in the same way, in the way that they are supposed to be used, right? Next thing is infrastructure, the cost of infrastructure. Now we can say all of this, but the truth is that trying to make all of these are not cheap. It's not something that I can just wave money at immediately. It requires a lot of planning. It requires that to make sure that the infrastructure is put in place and because it's expensive, so we need to consider that cost of the infrastructure. We can't just say, okay, because we have just go out and do it. So you have to consider the cost of it. And also the quality of the data. We have talked about that data, it's important, how the kind of data that we're collecting. We need to make sure that the data quality from surface stations are good enough to use for this particular data analytics, business analytics that we are looking at, right? And then we need to understand the complexity of the problem. Now, I'd mentioned earlier that, I was not a petroleum engineer, right? I was not a geoscientist, so I can look at it from the outside, right? So it might come across that the complexity of the problem is more than what is there. So we need to make sure that the issues, the problem is set up, the problem is understood between the people that are going to do the work, the data scientists, and also the engineers that are on the field. So it has to be a cross-functional team. It's not one person that's going to come in and do the work, and then the other team act aloof and don't know what is going on. So we need to make sure that that happens. Now, we have done with that. What are the benefits for you to adopt business analytics? There are a lot, but we'll just go with a few, right? So the first benefit is that you have something that is highly cost effective. So even though it costs a lot to set up, the long-term benefits will help you because you're going to see that it's going to be worth the amount that you're going to spend on it. And also you're going to get data in real time. You're not going to wait for people to come from the field. You can sit down in your office and see from a dashboard, see what is actually going on in the field in real time. Second thing is that it reduces risks and helps in decision making, right? So it reduces risks. The risks that you might have that let's say a drilling location that you set up for and all of that, maybe there's no oil in the end and all, or as long as it might take you to get all of those things, your risk is reduced because you have data that you can rely on, data that you know that is what is sourced because you passed through a lot of text, and then it helps you to make decision making better. So good decision making, improve the decision making process, and can be sure the decision that you're making is what it's supposed to be. Now, high accuracy in drilling methods and oil lubrication, right? I just talked about it. So if you are saying you want to drill in a location, how accurate is that exploration? Is that thought process? How have you gone through it? Is it a gut feeling, or you have the data that backs up the fact that there is oil in the place where you want to drill or the place you want to start an exploration? So this helps you to increase the accuracy of that. And then it ensures that your machines are performing efficiently. So because you are not using it, you are not wasting the performance of those machines where they should not. It means that you can make your machines last way longer and elongate the useful life of those machines. So those are just some of them. What are the considerations in applying big data tools? We have to look at them, make sure that we understand these particular things. So number one consideration when you apply big data tools is you have to understand how big data can be optimally used and what applications are possible. So we hear this and we don't just go to town, right? We can't just say, oh, we are just going to, just go like a kid in a candy shop. No, we have to make sure that this is the data that we have. This is the structured data that we have. What are the things we want to achieve, right? What are the applications that we want to achieve? So you have to consider that before you then proceed with it. So next thing is that you have to know when to upgrade a technology, right? So some technologies are outdated. That's why technology gets outdated. Sometimes 2-3 years, it can get updated to a better one. But then sometimes because it's technology, better, a newer is not always better. So then you have to make sure that you can say this is what's happening with technology. An upgrade is here, yes. However, the one that we have works for us. Or you can say the one that the upgrade is actually better and we need to upgrade to it, because again, the upgrade will cost money. It's going to cost. So you have to weigh the cost implications against what you have already and know whether it's worth it. And then personal and cybersecurity support. So personal support is, it's self-explanatory. We need to make sure that personal security is also there so that the machines are not tampered with. And then cybersecurity support, which is really important. So how do we make sure that the applications are safe from cyber attacks? Because it's 2020, and whether we like it or not, cyber attacks are everywhere. They are affecting every organization in some way, shape, or form. So we also need to make sure that the systems that we are set up are immune, or as much as possible immune. So no system is 100% safe from cyber attacks, but we can make it as hard as possible for hackers or any people that want to take the system down to get across to it. But that needs to be considered. You can't just put a system up that does not have any cybersecurity support. Very important. So what are the next steps to take after we've heard all of this? How do we then leverage this big data business analytics that we've heard about today? What do we then do? First things first, we need to know that companies are likely to shift their business strategy, right, from exploration to exploiting known reserves, which you can achieve by investing in proper infrastructure, right? So this means that the key lies in the ability to drive operation excellence, to save margins, and ensure sufficient capital for reinvestment necessary for the production. So by the time you have this data at your fingertips, right, you can then shift your business strategy from just going to town anywhere, just let me see whether this is here and all of that. But you go from doing that to expecting results that you already know about because your data has pointed you in the right direction. And you do this by investing in the proper infrastructure that you have. So we need to make sure that companies are investing in this proper infrastructure and make sure that we're able to use this to drive operational excellence, save margins. In this day and age where we need every dollar is important. So we need to save margins and then ensure that capital is sufficient for reinvestment and make sure that the company it has like long life and continues moving forward, right? So next thing, we know that business with big data analytics, companies will transform enormous data sets into sound oil and gas exploration decisions. So this noisy data, dirty data that we have, we'll turn it into things that can show us that, okay, this data exploration, this is what we need to do with this particular data. The data will start making sense to us. Our operational costs will be reduced. Equipment lifespan will be extended. Like I said, the useful life will be extended because we are not using the equipment where they are not supposed to be used, and we are lowering the environmental impact. Because in all the things that we do, we need to make sure that it's environmentally sound in everything. And then to leave us with this, while I was preparing for this, I came across a quote by McKinsey, and it says that the first oil and gas companies to make moves in data analytics, business analytics, making sense of big data, will be the industry leaders of tomorrow. So we have a choice. Do we want to be industry leaders of the past or the present, or do we want to be industry leaders of the future? And in companies, have companies that are going to outlive us, outlive people that are going to work even there some 20 years from now and keep living on. So thank you very much for being part of this. Try to keep to time as much as possible. I will have your questions now if you have any for me. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Adonye, for that fantastic presentation. It was quite informative. So at this point, like you said, I invite any questions. I'm looking at the comment section, and most of the questions have been addressed. Someone asked if the slides will be shared at the end of the day, and it's been responded there that yes, they should just drop their email addresses there in the announcement section, and we'll ensure that the slides will be sent across to them. Apart from that, I don't see any other questions, so I think it's clear that the topic must have been well understood and well digested. So I will just thank you again, Adonye, for that fantastic presentation. Thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing your expertise. So I'll just, before we round up this live webinar event, I would just like to make a few announcements, starting with our upcoming events. So on the 8th of October, we have another engaging and fantastic live webinar session that will be made available, titled Thriving with Emotional Resilience. There'll be a mix of games, assessments, teachings, coaching, therapy, and interactive exercises, that will expose participants to why their brain resists change through some unwanted emotions, what resilient professionals do differently and how to access their emotional awareness and resilience gaps, and how to regulate their emotions. This webinar will be facilitated by Dr. Osaz. That's Deji Osasona. He's the CEO of Winbox Consulting. You do not want to miss this. Again, the 8th of October 2020. It's a Thursday, next week Thursday to be precise, by 11:30 a.m. through Microsoft Teams. The publicity flyer is already being circulated. Another fantastic event to look out for is a live webinar session with Maria Angela Capello. The topic will be how to boost your resilience and leadership at work, 5 tips. Maria is a renowned leader, consultant, author in sustainability, as well as leadership, resilience, and mentoring. The topic is going to talk about how aspiring leaders can cultivate tenacity and perseverance irrespective of all the odds. This is going to be another fantastic webinar that you do not want to miss. It's going to hold on the 22nd of October by 11:30. Another one to look out for again is the e-technical session with O&O. The topic is going to be oil and gas facility / asset surveillance, monitoring, inspection, and security, application of SUAS platforms. The objectives are going to be to provide an exposition to SUAS, which is Small Unmanned Aerial Aquatic System technologies and platforms. There will be discussions on the application of the SUAS technologies and platforms in oil and gas operations, and they'll showcase some case studies with highlighting what O&O as an organization has done to encourage the adoption and advanced development of these technologies in the oil and gas operations. This wonderful e-technical session is going to take place on the 28th of October by 11:30 a.m. And the best way to ensure you don't miss any of this is to connect with SPE Lagos section. We have several social media platforms where we post our events, both events that are taking place and events that are going to take place in the future. Amongst them are the 3 events that I just highlighted. On LinkedIn, it's SPE Lagos section 61. Twitter, SPE_Lagos. On Instagram, SPE_Lagos. On Facebook, SPE.Lagos. And on YouTube, SPE space Lagos. So connect, follow, share, so you can stay informed and up to date on all SPE Lagos events and activities. So on that note, I'd just like to say thank you yet again to our guest speaker, Adonye, for that wonderful presentation. Thanks to the young professional team in the SPE Lagos section, our section chair, Mike Oyere, and every other person that has worked together to bring this fantastic webinar together. Thank you and have a good day. Goodbye.